Good morning, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing Austin. So a little bit about him. Austin Stanbury is a human-computer interaction scholar graduating from UF's Digital Worlds Institute. His work in extended reality has been published in ACM's VRST, covered by CBS and ABC, awarded at numerous university events internationally, and installed publicly on UF's campus. Austin's work on COVID reflections and XR in public health application was recently featured in Silicon Valley at Augmented World Expo 2022 as part of Unity Technologies AR Developments Showcase. His primary research interest is in developing XR applications that address social problems, especially in education and medicine. So if you're ready to go, Austin, we're really excited to hear about your work.
Oh, thanks so much. Great. Okay. So yeah, I'm Austin Stanbury, and I've put this talk together. It's a new talk. I haven't given it before. It's about spatial computing, which is a new paradigm in computer interfaces. And it's really interesting. It has some very kind of crazy implications for, I think, our society, for our way of life, frankly, in much the same way that the cell phone has changed the way that we live in daily life. So I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit, just because I'm very interested in it, and I hope that it piques your interest as well. So I will say maybe take what I say with maybe a big grain of salt. And I say that because I've put together this talk to kind of be a little provocative. So I think that, you know, the future, right, is not set in stone. But I think there are some very big implications of this technology that we should consider very carefully. So, you know, maybe some of the claims that I make will seem a little perhaps outlandish. I'm not sure what you all will think of it, but we'll see. So I'll get into the talk here if you could present that. Thanks so much. So my talk is about spatial computing, which is what I work in. And I've sort of subtitled this "The Future of Reality," as it were. So we'll sort of see what that means. So here's our agenda. The topics that we'll cover today is what is spatial computing in general. Sort of this is funny, but what is reality, right? You hear virtual and augmented reality all the time. So we'll sort of talk about what that reality that they're referring to is. And then we'll talk about the notion of extended reality, which is a very popular term today in these research circles. And then we'll talk about what I do is I mainly work with XR in health and education. So there's a little about me. They've given me a couple gold stars over the last couple of years. So, you know, I come from the Digital Worlds Institute at University of Florida, and we really work with this technology on a daily basis. I've tried to use it in ways that I find are interesting or helpful in the context of daily life. I'm not sure that I've succeeded to any great degree, but that's I suppose my qualifications for speaking to you here this morning. Thank you so much. So what is spatial computing? Well, it's a new method of interacting with computers. So the traditional paradigm that we all know is a screen with a mouse and keyboard. And if you think about it, it's kind of a lot like a map, right? The information is displayed on a flat screen. There are distortions of the information. Obviously, we interact with a lot of content like videos or even video games a lot of people play now, but it's all on a flat screen, but it tries to give the impression of being a 3D object or real space. But spatial computing is kind of this new paradigm where information from the computer is displayed in 3D space. So you will literally see holograms, as it were, in front of you, or with virtual reality, you'll be immersed in a 3D space by wearing this kind of pair of VR goggles. And the way that we interact with information on these computers is different as well, right? So on traditional interfaces, we have a screen plus a mouse and a keyboard. So you tell the computer what you want it to do by using a machine interface and buttons, right? You move the mouse around and you click buttons in. But with spatial computing, as you can see, this is me playing a virtual piano. The information, it quite literally, terribly sorry to turn my back on you there, it appears in front of you as a hologram. It looks pretty much just like this, which you see through these glasses. And you just interact directly with it, right? So if I want to play the keyboard, I just touch it, press the button, and it plays, which is very crazy. So it's a very different way of interacting with computers. It makes the information a lot more tangible, right? But what you're interacting with is really right there with you as if it were a real object, just like other objects in your space. Oops, terribly sorry. So, you know, what does this mean for us, right? Why is it a revolutionary technology? Well, I think that the best way to think about it is in regards to how we interact with the media that we are experiencing. So this is a picture of the moon landing, which is very relevant. So that, you know, traditional technologies bring media to us, right? It brings the moon or whatever you're seeing. It brings the news to you, to a screen. You watch it, it's there in your room, but it's on this flat display. And we kind of watch what's going on. But recently, as you can see in this picture, they actually sort of, I guess a lot like Star Trek, they sort of beamed up doctors into the International Space Station, right? So what spatial computing achieves is it places us in the media that we're experiencing. Rather than just watching it on television, actually what this technology does is it places you almost as if you were going into the television, right? So these doctors looked around, you know, individuals on the ISS saw them as if they were there, and they saw their environment, presumably as if they were there. I don't know how they were interfacing at home, but if they were wearing these glasses or whatever, presumably they would see the ISS around them, see the other astronauts or whatever, right? So it's a much more integral form of media. So, you know, how do we right now generally interact with this kind of media? Well, there's two big things, I'm sure. You know, these are almost just common use these days. So they have virtual reality and augmented reality. This is sort of funny picture of me without a haircut. With virtual reality, you have head-mounted goggles. You put them on. You can't see the world around you, but you interact with a simulated kind of world. So perhaps if I were in VR right now, I could be sitting in my room, but what I would be experiencing is standing with you here, unable to see my room. In augmented reality, they have these sort of bizarre looking glasses. I really like this picture. I think it really sort of sums up how goofy it is a little bit to don these goggles and see all this crazy computer generated imagery. But they show you computer-generated content in the real world. So perhaps if I was wearing these glasses right now, I could see a dinosaur walking around with us in this space. And presumably I could go up and touch the dinosaur. I could tell it, hey, come stand over here. And the dinosaur would walk. You can interact with it. It's not just like a video or whatever. So augmented reality, just to dive into this a little deeper, It was invented at Harvard by Ivan Sutherland. That's generally who's credited as the father of augmented reality. Back in, I think, 1968. So that's him standing with, I think this device was called the Sword of Damocles. And it was the first augmented reality display. But why is it important, right? So as I said, it allows you to see computer-generated imagery with the real world at the same time. But in practice, right, why it matters as a technology is it allows people to work together in the real world, right? So this is something real that she's working on, not quite sure what type of machine this is. But this woman is working on something real, but there's computer-generated content that's helping her. For instance, perhaps her boss or a coworker or something can beam into her reality where she's standing and say, "Hey, do this to that machine," or "Hey, you're messing it up. Don't do it like that," or whatever the case may be. But it primarily allows us to work together in the context of the real world. In virtual reality, it's kind of the opposite, right? So users are placed in a fully virtual world. So you're really not working together in the real world at all. But in general, people might meet in a virtual office space to do some paperwork or what have you. And they also might socialize, right? So I perhaps could appear to you as this banana and sort of walk around this little virtual campfire and tell stories about our day or whatever. But right now the status of the technology, in my opinion, is very entertainment focused at the time being. There's less practical applications, although they are working on them. Anyway, that's what these technologies can do for us. But obviously, right, so this is sort of a funny question. Perhaps it's a little flippant. But the point being that we talk about virtual and augmented reality, right? But what is the reality that we're talking about, and why is it important? For me, I feel that spatial computing, it brings new relevance to classical philosophical questions, and I think that the implications are pretty astounding, for me anyways. So obviously, right, well, there's a difference between perception and reality. That's maybe the starting point to talk about this. So, right, perception, I think, refers to information that we receive through our senses, right? You have sight, touch, sound, 5 senses or whatever. And that's how we know the world, right? You look around, you see all these chairs or whatever the case may be. I feel the floor under my feet, blah, 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 right? But we imagine that reality refers to some objective world beyond our senses, and perhaps we might be mistaken about what we see or don't see. So for instance, right, we may both look at some object and I say it's one way and you say it's the other, but we imagine that there really is some truth, some objective reality out there to be found. But all the way back since I think 380 BC, right, we sort of questioned the relationship. Humans in general have questioned the relationship between what they perceive and what is really real. And just to go over some of these classic statements, right? Of course, you have allegory of the cave, right, where this group of people are sort of chained up in a cave, and all they know is the shadows dancing across the cave wall. And they're supposedly their tormentors or their prison guards come and they make shadows dance across the wall of whatever, doves or a boar or people meeting or whatever. And Plato suggests that, okay, if that's all they know or all they see dancing on the wall for their entire lives, right? That's what they will take as reality, right? So the point being that, what you know and what you generally experience as being real in your daily perceptions you take to be reality, even if there's more out there, right? So the point is we might be mistaken or whatever, or to demonstrate that there's a relationship between what we think is real and what we see and experience on a day-to-day basis. And you have Descartes' evil demon, right? So he says, okay, suppose there's an all-powerful evil demon that takes, control of his mind and sort of shows him all these fake things, right? He makes dancers appear in his vision, or he makes, giant castles appear in the sky or whatever. So Descartes sort of asks, how does one know that this is not the case? How do we know that there is really a reality? Which is restated in sort of more modern brain in a vat, right? So you can say like, okay, imagine there's this brain submitted in a vat, a computer's feeding it information, the brain is thinking it's running, but really it's just a brain in a vat of water, right? I mean, all these questions are pointed at the same thing, which is demonstrating that, what our mind takes and what we see as being real, we tend to treat as real. And sometimes it's difficult to discern the difference between the quote unquote real world and the objects of our experience. Very famously, obviously, The Matrix is a classic sort of movie of this nature, right? This guy is in this computer generated world. It's funny to note that most of these situations are presented as sort of moral dilemma. Nobody thinks this is a good thing. What I'm suggesting about spatial computing is it really makes these kind of classic scenarios come to life. When you put on these virtual goggles or you put on virtual glasses and you see virtual content in the real world, right? I think the dangerous implication is that, or the strange implication maybe, is that people really do treat these objects of their experience, even though it's just light holograms or whatever, they treat it as being real. How do we tell the difference? That's what all these philosophers have asked, or The Matrix asked, and I'm not sure that I have the answer there, but what spatial computing allows us to do is it allows us to experience a simulated reality, just the same as the shadows dancing on Plato's cave wall, or Descartes' demon controlling his mind, making him see crazy stuff. It's quite literally what we have today, right? In entertainment, the cell phone can do this to your face, right? It's with augmented reality, make you appear all these crazy different ways. And in the industry, to train people now, they show them a virtual engine or whatever, and they train on these things as if they're real. And they carry those skills with them into the real world. This is quite common, for instance, like at Boeing or whatever, right? I mean, they use these AR glasses. The military uses the AR glasses to assist in production line techniques or military training. Even doctors are training with these technologies now, right? So it's quite common. Of course, everyone knows this app, Snapchat, that all young kids of my generation sort of use, but people are using these technologies every single day, right? So it's kind of crazy to think that every single day, millions of people are interacting with content that they know is not real for entertainment or for not real, quote unquote, for the purpose of entertainment or for training or to assist in the industry, right? It's pretty astounding, I think. So this brings me to this kind of crazy question. Are simulations real? Okay. How do we distinguish anymore between real and simulated things? Well, if you go back and look at, the Atari, right? Like video games. Okay. In 1982, you see this thing, right? I mean, you can very clearly tell, okay, this is not real. There's like this pixelated man or whatever. You interact with this content, but it's so obvious and in your face that it's simulated, it's just fake, that nobody at the greatest stretch of their imagination would say, oh, Atari, that's like a real world in there. You know what I mean? In 2006, it came a long way from this pixelated man here, but you'd still look at this and you know that it's a computer simulation. You know that it's fake. It's a game. It's engaged with for the purpose of entertainment, but it's not quite as in your face as Atari was in 1982. Now in 2022, they have virtual influencers, right? This person, Rumi, this is a computer-generated person. And if you zoom in on their face, you can see the hair follicles growing out of their scalp. You can see the pores on the skin. You can see the detail in the iris, etc. Right? So, quite frankly, if somebody just presents you with this photo, right, you might think this is a real person. You might think so. And clearly something in our common sense tells us, no, this is not real. We know that it's computer simulated. But why? Right? Why do we think that? I'm not sure that the answer is clear. So my question is, right, what is real anyways? Okay, so imagine I create a virtual tree. I know I'm sort of going a little bit into the bizarre here. But let's say that I create a virtual tree, okay? And I make the bark look perfectly real. You can see everything. And if you break it off, it has wood inside it, blah, blah, blah. And then I give you gloves. And you reach out and touch the tree and you can feel every groove. You can feel the sensations on your hand. And it just feels perfectly like exactly what you think a tree is. And then I give you this crazy thing and you can hear the sound of your finger tapping at the same time you feel it, at the same time you see it. And you can smell the pine sap. And you can maybe you feel a little silly and you stick your tongue out and you can taste the bark. You can taste the syrup coming out of the maple tree, okay? We might think in our mind, okay, but it's still not real, right? And I get that. But even if it's not real, even if there's some quality left out that doesn't make it real, how will you tell? How will you discern that for yourself? If on inspection, everything that you can know about this virtual thing seems perfectly real, how will you know? That's my question. What more do I need to do to make that tree real? What is left out? You know what I mean? And it's crazy. I know, like you think like it's at the end of the day, it's a computer, it's fake, whatever. And I don't think that anybody should confuse real and virtual things. All I'm saying is that presented with this perfect simulacra of a tree, how will you tell that it's fake? You know, let's say you might say, okay, well, I have all this crazy gear on, right? That's a very fair point, but let's say at a sufficient level of technology, they make the gear invisible, you can't feel it anymore, you know? How will you know? I don't know. So here's my prediction, okay? Given sufficiently advanced technology, it's going to become difficult to find a meaningful difference between real and virtual things. That's my prediction. It's not what I hope for, but I just think that is the case. And here's what I have to say about it, right? Even if common sense tells us that virtual things are not real, okay, they can be functionally real, okay? So and here's what I mean by that, right? If you have, I don't know, let's say if you have a virtual pencil that you can take notes with your little glasses, and it's everywhere you want it to be, it works like a pencil, it feels like a pencil, it tastes like a pencil, it breaks like a pencil. Even if you know it's fake, functionally, you treat it exactly like a real thing. So, you know, depending on how we choose to use these simulated things, they can become kind of real in a way. So knowing this, my contention is we need to carefully consider how simulation technologies fit into our lives. You know, knowing that presumably anything could become real. Then we really need to consider where it's appropriate to use these technologies. So With all this prior discussion, I think this really explains the notion of what we refer to as extended reality. Okay, you have reality as you know it, but these computers are now able to extend reality. They can bring fantastical fake things into our lives and make them functionally real. So, how does that actually look in day-to-day life, and what do we do about it, right? So what does it really mean to extend reality? What are we actually doing with it? Well, for one, people are changing their appearance. On YouTube, like the very famous, what they call a VTuber, or I guess it means virtual YouTuber, is named Code Miko. So it's this girl, and she wears I guess some type of suit and hand thing that helps the computer track what she's doing in the real world, along with a camera that tracks her motions. And it translates this into her online persona. And she appears like this, I guess, pretty much every day. She makes content like this all the time. And she doesn't appear like this on the internet. You generally don't see this. You see the simulated person, okay? So that's one implication, that people can change their appearance and they can pretty much permanently change it in the ways that they appear to other people. Obviously, if she walks outside, that doesn't keep up with her. But in the forums in which she actually lives and works, she does appear like that pretty much every day. It's pretty crazy. There's opportunities for commerce and consumerism. So this is a scene from Ralph Breaks the Internet, which is just a funny animated movie. But as you can see in the background, right, they have this concept of these sort of augmented reality advertisements. So you can see, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, looks like Google Cloud or Microsoft Cloud or something. WhatsApp, I guess. I think eBay is in here somewhere. The point being that as you are just walking down the street, going to the store in your everyday life, then you might get sort of pop-up ads. Maybe you even get some kind of virus or something like that on your devices. And you're seeing advertisements, pop up for real services, but they're virtual advertisements. Maybe that's going to be our downfall. Maybe that's super consumerism. You can never escape the ads anymore. I don't know. It hasn't quite come to pass, but it's on the way. You can be sure the bigwigs are dreaming up how to get those advertisements in front of you. And obviously, you have new concepts of place and time, where you might hang out with your friends around a virtual campfire as a ninja, I guess, or a samurai, or whatever this person is supposed to be, or some type of monster. So you have new places, new locales. And don't forget that because these things are virtual, they're also timeless. So, the tree never changes. The seasons never change, unless it's, programmed to do so. Very weird implications. So, what could go wrong? What could go wrong? Famous last question. Well, there's a couple of really crazy things. There's now this concept of deep fakes, which basically a computer can scan your facial structure and can take a picture of, let's say, I could take a picture of Ron DeSantis, our governor, and the computer could scan my face, could scan his face, and then create a virtual version of him that's like a puppet. And whatever I say, whatever I do, I move my face, right? You will see Ron DeSantis on the computer doing that, okay? Now, right now, it's just kind of this crazy thing that some researcher had made possible. But in the long term, right, like, how will you know when somebody has really said something? Who will you trust? And it's not just deep fakes, right? Let's say, like, you have a video of me robbing a bank, and it's all fake. Some actor made it in a set, but he did it with a scan of my body and assets, like virtual objects, that look exactly like the real thing, right? How will I prove that I didn't do that? And what does that mean for our court system, for law enforcement, etc.? Very crazy and not unambiguously good. The cameras can track your eye movements. You wear this thing on your face, it can tell what you're looking at and produce a heat map. Oh, this person spent X number of seconds looking at your face or this, blah, blah, blah. Now imagine, you're walking down the street and they can tell what advertisements you're looking at. They can tell if you've looked at an opposing candidate's political advertisement, or if you didn't. They can tell maybe what you read. Who knows, right? I mean, this is sort of scary. It's sort of on the horizon. I don't think they're doing it right now. Perhaps they are. But there are problems with these technologies. And now these glasses can actively alter what you see. So everybody knows about these, Stalinist fake pictures where, he at times edited out people that he sent to the gulag or just disagreed with or whatever, right? Now you're wearing these glasses. They don't need to wait to issue a photo that they've doctored. Somebody could presumably take control of those glasses and make it so I can't see you, no offense, sitting there actively while you're walking around. Maybe they, I don't know who they is supposed to be, but let's say Microsoft doesn't want you to see Google's ad. So while you're wearing their glasses, you can't see it. It's possible. I don't think it's probable. That's, I don't know. There's a lot of problems. So what do I think? So I think we need a philosophy of technology. And what I would say is that, over the past couple kind of decades, it seems to me that, technological advancements have kind of been unambiguously embraced. Every time a new technology comes out, we're like, oh, what can we do with it? That's the main question we ask, right? What can we do with it? How can we use it, etc.? Which is kind of an unthoughtful philosophy a little bit. Let's say they come out with some new iPhone or whatever, right? I mean, there really is no cultural dialogue about how technologies should be used, just how to use them. With that in mind, right, extended reality, as you can see, it could pretty significantly change our lives. It could change our lives in ways that we can't even predict. So in my opinion, developing a kind of philosophy of technology is the most important thing we can do to, overcome any challenges that these changes pose. So what do I mean by that? When is it appropriate to use technology? When is it appropriate to use what kind of technologies? Already you see sometimes people will say, no phones at the dinner table, no televisions at the dinner table. It is true that sometimes we do approach these kind of questions because we can see how technologies might impose on things that we find valuable. But it's obviously with the crazy influx of technology in our lives, I don't think just not using it at the dinner table is probably sufficient for an overall worldview of how we should incorporate technologies into our lives. Moreover, what types of technology are appropriate to which situations, right? I mean, you might say, okay, well, we can meet in virtual reality. But should we? Should kids have their play dates in virtual reality rather than going to see each other? Of course, there's going to be tons of people who say, yes, what are you afraid of? There's no problem, etc. I get that. I think there is maybe cause for concern at times. To me, I would think, there are probably times where using certain technologies or situations where using certain technologies are inappropriate. So where is this technology going to be used? Well, it's going to be used in education. It's already used in education, teaching in schools. It's used in medicine, as you can see, with doctors beaming up to the ISS. It's used in commerce and advertisement, right? It's used in governance, law enforcement. Not yet. This is probably a lot more on the horizon here. And obviously, it's used for entertainment and socializing. So, in all these contexts and more, right? I think it's appropriate to think about, why are we using this technology? Is it helping us achieve what we really want? Obviously, like cell phones or whatever or social media has already shown us to a great degree, right, that just the goal of enhancing communication was probably not sufficient to justify their use in every situation. As we've seen, like maybe those social networks are not really such a great method of transferring news because of the whole fake news thing that we've been going through. Or maybe like with cyberbullying and all that stuff, maybe it's not the best for school kids to use after school. I don't know. There's a million questions, and I'm not trying to really propose any hard solutions. I'm just saying that especially as these technologies gain the ability to really transform how we perceive the world in ways that we can't even really discern what's real and what's fake anymore. We do need to answer these questions in probably a more robust way than we're accustomed to, in my opinion. So what do I do? So now that I've told you all this bad stuff, maybe, or good stuff too, about extended reality, what do I do? How did I screw up the world so far? Well, mainly I work in education, medicine, and machines. So I've contributed to and built a couple apps. I built a science education app for middle school education that takes middle school or high school students through the universe, right? So what they can do, they can put on these glasses and they can hold the earth in the palm of their hands and see it spinning. They can see how big the moon is compared to the earth, how it orbits, or see how comets go around the sun, or whatever. One great thing about these technologies is it lets you directly experience things which you would never be able to see. You can see glucose molecules in a diabetes patient up close, which you just can't observe with your real eyes, right? You can see the inner workings of an engine right in front of your face and take it apart, which you couldn't do in normal situations. So there are really compelling reasons to use these technologies too, provided we use them responsibly. I built, along with a team, COVID Reflections, which is a public art installation. And it shows you the impact that COVID has on your lungs. Here's another example of making visible things that you would never be able to see in real life. So you can see the impact of the disease on your body, what it does to your organs, in a way that you just cannot directly observe any other way. And I also built an app along with a team called HoloKeys, and it lets you play a virtual piano. And the virtual piano is linked to a real world piano. So there's one right there. I could be, for instance, in Australia. I could reach out and play this piano, and it would transfer my performance here to this piano, which is pretty incredible. I think, well, I suppose I'm sort of tooting my own horn there, aren't I? But at any rate, the point being that there are some very compelling and powerful reasons to use these technologies, which are interesting and which will help us gain an understanding of the world, which is currently impossible for us, right? We just can't see in day-to-day life how atoms function. We can't walk through the solar system. We can't see the insides of our body, etc. So there are obviously situations where this is very important. But obviously there's, cause for reflection on how these technologies fit into our lives as well. And that's it. That was my talk. So you can reach me at that email. You can go to my website and see the million other apps that I built, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I think looks as though we have approximately 15 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions or outrage or whatever the case may be, you can let me know and I'll do my best to address them. Thanks so much.
I've been having conversations with other people here at Oak Hammock about how we imagine the world that our great-grandchildren are going to live in with climate change having occurred. What's it going to be like in 2050 for them? And somebody said, well, if we could just had a dial, we could turn up the temperature of the Earth to the whatever that temperature is going to be. Why we would really make an important message. Well, of course we can't do that. But then we started thinking about, is there something that, say, the Museum of Natural History could put on, Museum of Natural History could put on, that could simulate the world of 2050 in a way that would be more compelling and realistic than anything that we could imagine telling them. It sounds to me like your answer would be, yeah, of course you could do that, right? Certainly
You could. And they do, actually. The company based out of Plantation, Florida, recently built I believe it's a wildfire simulator that shows, how wildfires spread under what climate conditions, etc. I think that is exactly the place where these technologies have a meaningful and valuable impact in our life. That is a perfect example of, in my opinion, a kind of a responsible use and a good use of this technology.
Tomorrow we're going to have Doug Jones, who is the chairman of the board for the Florida Museum of Natural History, here to give a talk. Oh, I would like to get him talking with you. Oh, so please let me get some more information about how to contact you.
Absolutely, I have my card, so I'll give that to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That's very nice.
Okay, Andriana, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. So I wrote one in the chat, so I'll just read it out loud. So first of all, Austin, thank you so much for this. This was a super interesting talk. It made me think of the ethical problems that have come up with other new technologies, such as Spot the robot dog being used for surveillance in communities, disproportionately communities of people of color. So have similar issues come up with XR, or is the technology not quite there yet to be kind of co-opted by military or law enforcement groups?
So I don't know of any cases where it's been used in law enforcement thus far. And that's, I am not omnipotent. So there very likely is somewhere that, this has been used by law enforcement. I know that it is used in military applications, and I definitely understand the concern there, right? That's sort of like, I don't know, with how powerful these technologies are becoming, right? It really makes it really creates a big opportunity for something disastrous to happen, right? It's not just like a tiny little thing. I mean, with these technologies, you can really completely alter how people perceive the world and their environment and how they interact with other people. And its capacity to do so is only increasing, right? So that's not I'm not trying to be a doomsayer by any case. I just think that it is very, very important, exactly as you're suggesting, to think about what situations are appropriate for us to use these incredibly powerful technologies, right? You wouldn't just hand, for instance, a bazooka or a rocket to a middle schooler and say, sort of have fun. But, these technologies which are capable of completely altering our perception, we're just like, just run, have fun with it. You know what I mean? So, and so I think that's a very, very relevant point.
Thank you for that. I will just mention that I've seen some really good deep fakes. I know even just on TikTok, I know of a Tom Cruise deep fake. And I think like if I just wasn't aware that was a deep fake, I would have just thought it was Tom Cruise saying some bizarre stuff on a page. And I feel like in the way that you're saying it advances really quickly in ways that it becomes difficult to kind of tell whether something is real or not. So thank you.
Exactly. Oh, thank you, ma'am.
Is anybody working on systems to ensure privacy and security in these?
That's a very good question. I guess they must be out there. It's not like a very in-your-face type of thing, at least in my experience. I mean, I think that's exactly the kind of concern that I have, right? And that's in this sort of presentation here, is that all of these questions, I mean, those type of questions, don't you think, are almost more urgent than the question, what can we do with this technology? To me, right? It's like, how can we use it safely? First, we need to decide that, at least as a ground rule, and then run with it. Maybe, that's sort of what I think too.
I would imagine that the more we get into this, there's going to be a need for more legislation. And we're not handling legislation very well these days. What's the 6 o'clock news going to look like? How do we react to the world news that we see on CNN or Fox at this time in our lives? That scares me to death, that I would see the war in Ukraine right now coming to me in extended reality. Scares me to death.
I can imagine.
What do you forecast there?
Well, I don't know. I would say I remember, and I don't mean to make a terribly controversial statement. I know that, the televised broadcasts, for instance, of the Vietnam War, it brought that footage into people's homes for the first time, that people were really seeing day-to-day kind of footage of war or destruction, as far as I know. And I know that had an impact on how people kind of viewed these situations, how they experienced them, and how real they were to them. Of course, these technologies have kind of worn off on us. I guess they're not quite as novel. We see some kind of crazy thing, anything really, happening on television. We're almost like, well, we see this kind of crazy stuff every day, and flip the channel. I mean, it takes on an element of unreality. With extended reality, I fully suspect that could put you right on the battlefield. And maybe, I presume it would have the same kind of impact on some people as seeing footage of the Vietnam War did. Being there in a way that you never have and seeing what war is like, or what anything is like. They could put you in perhaps one of these mass shootings or a school where a kid is going crazy. I mean, I know this is very sort of morbid topic, but they could do it, right? And I don't think that's entirely bad, to be honest with you. As scary as it is, sometimes it's good that we experience these things as real, that we can really understand them as more than just a piece of media or another piece of bad news. I don't know. I don't want to be there. And I'm just as afraid of these kind of crazy situations too. At the same time, though, I mean, you know, it makes it real. It makes it real, and it puts it into our lives in a way that we can't otherwise experience it. Maybe there is no unambiguously good or bad about it, but it certainly will impact our lives.
Thank you. There's a comment here on chat. Maybe you can just comment. It says, my concern is if it is used by political groups to support ideas that are in their interest, but not ours.
Well, I suppose that's sort of a truism from the beginning of politics. You know, just about any technology comes, especially powerful technologies, come with the capacity, obviously, to use technologies in the interest of some group who knows how to wield them. I don't know, you know, it could go anyway. That's why I said maybe take what I say with a grain of salt, right? This is all left to be written. What we do with it, what we think about it, how we think it's appropriate to use these technologies is ultimately what will happen, right? So what I think is most important is to start thinking about it now and thinking about it in a more robust way than just saying, maybe I shouldn't use the cell phone at the dinner table, because I know that's for me, that's one of the main places where I really realize that I have a philosophy of how technology should be used. But everywhere else in entertainment, socialization, work, all these other elements of my life in commerce, I just kind of accept these things uncritically. You know, it's just how the world works. I'm not saying they're all bad. I'm certainly not saying they're all good either. I'm just saying that it's very important to develop a notion of what we want technology to be, how we want to use it. That's my contention.
I just have a question about that, the deep fakes. I had no idea about that. Is that kind of like stealing someone's intellectual property though, or you can just
It could
take
be
anyone's?
Well, it's such new terrain.
And there's no legislation. Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you. Any other questions here or on Zoom? We sure appreciate you coming in today, Austin.
why, thank you.
And
Thank you so much.
all right, thank you. Please join us next week for our next session. Thank you, everyone.